Hello, my friends. Mandy here with a quick invitation for you to join the Patreon for our show. We've recently switched up some of the benefits, including a new monthly workbook to go along with all the incredible content you're getting on the show. It's a coach yourself through grief kind of a vibe, and for only $10 a month, it is a wholly worthy and affordable way to invest in your own healing process without the commitment of a full coaching relationship. Learn more at patreon.com/Mandy Capehart, and of course, the link is in the show notes. Thank you as always for being here. Now let's get into the good stuff. Welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. You are listening to episode 106, titled Forgetting to Heal. So I've talked about intentionally forgetting for the last few weeks on social media, and it's resonating with you and upsetting a few people too. The idea of releasing a memory stirs a lot of emotions that we may not be ready to express or experience. But rather than backing off the topic, we're going to dig through it some more, okay? Because we want to uncover what you might gain from letting a few things go. Now, before we get too far, remember, letting go is not the purpose of our grief work. So we can gently release that overly simplified platitude because that's not what I'm asking of you. The purpose of grief work is emotional and holistic integration, raising our energy into being and not doing. The grief work in which we experience the greatest measurement of healing and integration is the work that leads us to becoming fully ourselves. When we invite our true self to the surface, past the memories, the personality traits, the defense mechanisms, and the coping strategies, we encounter a being so ready to express themselves with compassion that our grief can feel suddenly less suffocating. When we talk about grief work, we're not talking about doing more to make sure you're grieving correctly either. Sometimes in our coaching conversations, we'll discuss adding a practice or experiment to test some theories and see what habits we could benefit from cultivating. But for the most part, we are looking for new ways to experience our holistic selves with less pressure and criticism. We are finding ways to be more like ourselves. This is why I tell every client to pace themselves in their grief work. You're not just reeling from great loss, you are restructuring your sense of self. And doing the work of grieving isn't about worksheets and retreats, although both are great in their own way. Doing the work of grieving is being fully present, no matter what emotions, thoughts, or feelings are present with you. Many grief professionals would have you face your coping mechanisms and defense mechanisms first. There's a difference between the two, but for the moment, let's actually address why they're necessary. If you've read my book, you'll know that in the first chapter, we unpack the value and gift of denial. Grievers need denial and defense mechanisms to maintain a manicured emotional landscape for survival. Often the initial shock of grief and flurry of activity can push us into the emotional weeds of grieving. Defense mechanisms allow us to mentally navigate the emotional overflow and strategize for so-called lawn care when we are better equipped to handle the work in front of us. Defense mechanisms are typically passive or unintentional responses to our grief, fear, shame, anger, or even embarrassment. And we have time-tested habits of fence building to keep ourselves as even-keeled as possible, and dismantling those mechanisms is not going to help our healing. Forgetting as a byproduct of a defense mechanism is fine. We let things slip from our mind when they're not important enough, when they're part of the overwhelm causing our focus to wane, or when we simply can't be bothered to hold that info at the front of our minds. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's a natural human habit because we were never meant to be walking notepads. So letting things slip is a way of our mind saying, hey, you have enough on your plate for now. When we get into the conversation about intentionally forgetting versus intentionally remembering, we recognize that it becomes a coping skill for us. Intentionally forgetting is an active process where we introduce a number of methods to support our neural pathways as they reroute for healthier responses. So, made more simple, forgetting on purpose is a brilliant way to remember what matters. And that's why we're talking about coping mechanisms, because the coping mechanisms are the skills we've cultivated that serve us for survival. We need them, we use them frequently, and while some of them become so ingrained they're automatic, we typically have awareness of our behaviors and choices as a way to cope with the too muchness of loss. So let's explore the coping mechanism of intentionally forgetting so that you can evaluate for yourself if this is a skill set you could benefit from in healing. We know our brain is brilliant at arranging our memories for recall while also suppressing things that could be harmful long term. My own brain and experiences of trauma are no different. Many trauma survivors have a lack of recall or memories to investigate, even. And we're not going to walk this path in today's talk, but it's important to bear in mind that the impact of trauma on the brain is a big reason why intentional, compassionate grief work is essential to our healing journeys. When we are grieving, our brain will ruminate on what we could have done differently and often keep those thoughts at the forefront of our mind. They swirl for so long that other thoughts become foggy and leave us feeling obsessed with our own grief. I became very annoyed with myself and my brain when I couldn't slow down ideas or memories. It often felt like I was under attack, unable to manage my own experiences or ideas. Deciding to forget some details and experiences served significantly for my own healing. And it's not that I can't recall the memories now, and I'll do so as an example in a moment. It's that I gave myself an out. Remembering the situations around my mom's final hospital stay before multiple hospice care facilities felt like I could control part of the uncontrollable outcome. I was searching for someone to blame, constantly screaming at medical professionals who seemed careless and indifferent. Every day, the memory of someone neglecting or harming my mom in her last days would swoop forward and derail my intentions. And I wasn't making it all up. It was an awful situation she was in. Some days, I would act on those feelings and memories and make a bunch of phone calls. Some days, I would shutter myself in my room. And others still, I pretended everything was fine and masked my way through the day until I could be home and fall apart. A lot of this was over a missing bag of jewelry. My mom had the same small pouch for her jewelry for years, and after leaving the hospital for the final time, she remembered that it was missing. It's hard to know if she was remembering correctly or if she had just left it somewhere at home. And when we called the hospital the first 3 times, no one claimed to have seen it in the first place or located it after she left. I wish that even in my grief, I could have trusted the hospital staff and just left it alone. But my fear of losing her manifested in an obsession in finding her jewelry bag and blaming her care providers for failing her. What I needed wasn't to find the jewelry. I needed to remember the jewelry in a new way to decide what mattered. Intentionally forgetting has a lot of strategies connected to it, and I'll link some articles and resources about it in the show notes. But for me, I started asking myself why I needed the jewelry bag returned. Because every time I thought about it, what followed was hours of trying to cognitively sort through the same mess of missing items, phone calls, inattentive physicians, failed medical interventions, neglectful hospice care facilities, socioeconomic discrimination, broken family relationships, and so much more. It spiraled, and it all started with the thought of a few inexpensive pairs of earrings. All of those thought pathways carved deeper and deeper in my brain each time a single thought of my mom's jewelry came to mind. And for a while, I couldn't even look at a photo of her where jewelry was visible because I would immediately wonder if that was one of the pieces we'd recovered or if it was still missing, and the whole cycle would begin again. And this is common. This is not something that I experienced in an isolation. I have talked to so many grievers who have similar stories. I tried a few strategies before finding one that helped me relieve myself from these ruminating, horrible memories. First, I decided one new way of remembering her jewelry started with replacing my thoughts of her jewelry went missing to someone is enjoying her jewelry. And maybe that someone is a family member. Maybe it's a stranger. Maybe it's me. And my mom, in her confusion, had the bag all along. I don't need a fact to resolve my questions. I needed clarity that felt a little more like control. And for a while, that strategy helped. But at the end of the day, it didn't change how I was experiencing the memories. It just gave me something else to think about. And it only lasted for so long. Clarity and control are funny bedfellows. We think that the first leads to the second, but That's a misunderstanding. In this, my control came from allowing myself to focus on the higher truth of what mattered to me as I grieved, and I knew it wasn't the jewelry. But pretending the jewelry was happier with someone else also didn't matter to me, which is why that stopped working after a few tries. So, my second strategy was to force myself to forgive everyone involved. The memories would swirl, and I would pray about forgiving the doctors, the staff, the family members, the strangers. I thought I would will myself into healing by trying to release these obvious grudges and the hatred that I was curating. And that obviously didn't work either. It just made me angry. It made me feel a great sense of unfairness and injustice that I needed to forgive someone else, or maybe even an imaginary someone else, so that I could heal first. So when that didn't work, I turned to a version of meditation. When the memory came up, I would visualize a container for the memories and place them one by one inside. I would then picture that container in a safe place and give myself permission to return to it when I wanted to instead of capitulating when the memory popped up and demanded attention. You know, when you return to an old familiar place and find some keepsake you'd forgotten, it's not something you necessarily want to throw out, but you also aren't scrambling to find room in your suitcase and take it home again. This is a little bit like that. It's a back of the closet box you can open when you want to and someday decide to dispose of if you'd like. The more I practiced putting the memories back into the container, the more easily I could focus on the experience and emotion within the memories instead of the event itself. See, our big emotions are always connected to relationships. And in this case, all my unmet emotions from losing my mom were demanding attention. For the next few months, when any thought connected to her jewelry, hospital stay, hospice experience, or even my last goodbye came along, I noticed which emotions came along with it. Instead of allowing the emotions to flood into my body and take over my thoughts, I acknowledged that sadness or anger or frustration was present in the room with me. Those thoughts of a secondary loss of her belongings were so visceral in my body because it was part of my loss with her. My body carried the tightness of balled up fists and ready to spew vitriol with each memory, and I was done bearing the weight. So, whatever the emotion, as I allowed it to exist, I could see it changing shape, color, or texture before me. And as I sat with it and extended my heart of compassion toward it, the emotions themselves became less threatening, less weighty. I noticed my thoughts softening as well. Instead of remembering what wrong might have been done, I remembered the way I felt so much lighter after releasing my responsibility I felt toward the memory. Her jewelry was not my responsibility, neither was the memory. Nothing about either of those would restore my loss or make things right. My responsibility was to myself now and my future self, to the people I would continue to see every day and teach to love through loss, and to the person I wanted to keep in my mind as my mom. Because intentionally forgetting means we also get to choose what we want to remember. We tend to wear rose colored glasses when we consider the people we've lost, and it's okay to do that. Part of intentionally forgetting is allowing ourselves to reflect on what mattered and what was healing before the loss ever happened. Because we know that people are complicated. Some are harmful, some are not capable of apologizing or reconciling before they go. How we choose to keep them in our minds is up to us, and intentionally forgetting is one way of reclaiming ourselves from that person too. So, with that in mind, I want to tell you about how angry I was at my mom when she decided she didn't want a funeral. There are some incredible practices culturally around the world when it comes to funerals, wakes, and celebrations of life. And if you've never made time to learn about them, which I understand, I hope you will. In fact, Amanda Held Opelt is a beautiful author and sister of the late Rachel Held Evans, also an author, who died suddenly in 2019. And in one of her recent books, A Hole in the World, she explores rituals of grief from around the world. And it is a beautiful way to learn and remember what we already hold as valuable. What I gained from this work and from reflecting on my anger of my mom was my own value of not attending funerals. See, when she died, I had attended plenty in my life, and she didn't want one. And my grandfather, who had died shortly before her, hadn't wanted one either. My mom went so far as to ask us not to announce her death in the local paper or even really online. And I struggled so much with this. I thought I wanted the comfort of others, of people who knew her. I thought I wanted the memory of having this great, beautiful service and celebrating her life. I wanted to hear stories from other people, and I felt like I was really ripped off. Although my mom was a very private person and had her own reasons of asking this, also suspect that she wanted us to pursue healing in a way that eliminated these final memories of her life through her death. Because her experience with chemotherapy was violent and harsh. It was a complete opposite of the beautiful and active and funny woman she was every day. And as I reflect on the way we chose to honor her memory and spread her ashes, I realize her wish for no funeral was a gift. She was choosing a better memory for us. She allowed us the space to carve our own thoughts to remember, to carry a part of what we wanted to heal with, and to protect our grief from the hundreds of people who might have wanted a piece of her or her story. The last funeral I attended was for a precious friend and leader in my college days. The event was somber and heavy, and we laughed and cried, and we saw old friends and shared stories, and it was lovely to reconnect. And afterwards, I spent a long time journaling and processing my relationship to them and what I experienced at the service. But the memories of my friend and leader are now all connected to the day of his death and the way he was eulogized. Could I use this process of intentionally forgetting to retrain those pathways? Of course I could. But I also could recognize that my intentionally forgetting starts with intentionally choosing the way we interact with others here and now, myself included. We choose the memories we carry with us. We carry them in every part of our being: mind, heart, body, and spirit. And sometimes allowing ourselves to forget to pick up the heaviest burdens is a gift we give ourselves, one that does not diminish the reality of what happened or who mattered. It simply honors how much we matter and our reality as just as valuable right here and now. Thank you for listening to episode 106 of Restorative Grief. Forgetting isn't a different way of forgiving someone. That's an entirely different conversation. Intentionally forgetting allows us to choose what we find meaningful and healing, and that choice makes all the difference. This is an invitation to reclaim your autonomy over grief and how life shakes out around you. You are the one at the wheel, so choose where you'll steer your ship. If this is your first time listening to Restorative Grief, I hope you can recognize that you too have autonomy and authority to guide your own story. Your experiences of grief are unique to you, and until you invite yourself to explore them, you'll never know what kind of healing you also carry. One way to learn more about your own grief story is to consider one-on-one grief coaching with me, or by joining our Patreon and using our episode workbook to work through the conversations with a more self-reflective stance. Check out the show notes for links to all that and more, and consider leaving a review on Apple or Spotify. Please be sure to subscribe to the show and share us with a friend, or even reach out on social media because I love chatting with new people. And as always, one last thing. Please remember, the only solution for grief is to do the work of grieving. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week.